All right, so today we're going to take a look at portraits. There's a lot to the subject of portraits. Today we're going to focus on your skills on the side of the camera, just working the camera and starting to pay attention to light. There's another responsibility you have when you're dealing with portraits. First of all, right now we're always going to be talking about photographing people. So, um, a portrait is not going to be an animal picture, like not your dog, your cat. For this, there will be a time when we do that kind of assignment, but for this first one, you're looking at photographing people. The second thing is we're showing who they are, not just what they look like. So it's not so much about the pose, it's how they present themselves to you. As a photographer, you have a responsibility to work with the people you photograph to make them comfortable, or at least in this case, you do. Um, the other thing you need to do is you need to pay careful attention to the light and how the light shines on them. For this project, we're going to be working outdoors, so you're going to be dealing with working either in the shade underneath a tree or an overhang or a shade structure somewhere, or you're going to be looking at photographing in sunlight. With this batch of portraits, it's incredibly critical that their eyes are in focus. And the last thing I want you to think about is that the background matters. So, where you put this person and what's going on behind them is going to make a big difference. So, let's take a look at some samples by some master photographers. So this picture is taken by Linda McCartney. She was married to Paul McCartney from the Beatles, and she was the way that she and Paul met was that she was a famous rock and roll photographer in the 60s in the United States and in the UK. And so this is a portrait she did of Jimi Hendrix. So the first thing that I'm hoping you'll notice is the background is totally simple, something that we've already practiced quite a bit. She's photographing close to him, and it's real clear that he knows he's getting his picture taken based on the look on his face, the way that he's got his body facing straight towards her. You can see into who he is. And he's got this little bit of a like devilish grin, or the beginning of a grin, like checking out what's happening off camera away from him. He has a prop. He's got his sunglasses, which he's sort of chewing on the edge of them. Um, and he's, like I already mentioned, he's not looking at the camera. So when you're doing your portraits, some you're going to have them looking at the camera, others you'll have them looking away. But in this case, looking away is helping communicate his personality and his curiosity and just sort of a sense of his spirit. This is a picture that Linda McCartney took of Paul and one of their children. They'd just been out riding in the British countryside on horses in the late afternoon. And to keep his daughter warm, he's got her tucked inside his jacket. And so she's kind of like peeping her face up. And so what you get when you look at this picture is you get not only the smile on his face and the warmth of the sunlight on his face and on her face, but you get the sense of how proud and how happy he is to be a dad, and that he's really all about keeping his child safe, wrapped up in this warm jacket. By photographing in the late afternoon, we have no harsh shadows. So that's a really important thing to keep an eye out for. On portraits, when we pick up harsh shadows, you'll get to see how it works out for you, but it changes their face and it changes the meaning of the picture. But framing, the idea of having a face inside of shapes, kind of like here we're seeing, get the pointer to come up for a second. Right here we're seeing he's got this nice silver line from the zipper of his jacket and then this other edge that comes up. So my eye catches this line and goes right down to his daughter's face, and I look right there. Plus, I've got his eyes right up here in the upper third. Not a lot of distraction or dead empty space in the background. It's simply just bands of color that tell me they're outside. Okay, the next photographer that I pulled from is Annie Leibovitz, and we'll look at her work an awful lot this year. She's done huge amounts of portraits of people in popular culture. You've probably all seen pictures by Annie Leibovitz. You've seen it either in Vanity Fair magazine, Rolling Stone magazine, ads for Disney, ads for American Express. You'll see. But in this is a portrait she did of her mother. And she did this portrait, I want to say in the 90s. I'm not exactly sure of the date, but it's her mom looking right at her. And her mom, as you can see, bringing back the pointer here, mom's face is in nice, soft, even light. So it's almost like mom is standing somewhere where there's shade on the front of her face, but you can see there's highlight, like the sun is behind her, so it's hitting the back of her hair. It's also hitting the edge of her shoulder and her neck. But what having the face be in shade means that her face is relaxed and she's looking straight at us. Her expression is very natural. And in this case, the camera is slightly higher than the subject. So the camera is up just a little bit looking down, not doing anything to make the mom look small or less powerful, but just it's a more gentle look at her mother, okay? And then we also have rule of thirds coming in. Mom's face is very close to being right in the middle of the picture. Like if I were to draw an X, if I were to go, whoop, Tupac, come back to Tupac in a second. But if I were to go 1/3, and then over here, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. If I were to superimpose the grid, you'd see like mom's eye right here is at one of those 1/3 intersection points. And mom's pushed a little bit over to the side of the frame so that she's not smack dab in the middle. That's important. Okay, let's look at Tupac. So Richard Avedon, this is actually an indoor studio picture, but the lighting that he's used is very similar to look like soft outdoor lighting. So sometimes when we take portraits of people, it's to tell the story of who they are through symbols and through props. So what you see is a portrait of Tupac with his shirt mostly off, but still resting on his arms, kind of like a blanket or protection, or almost tying up his arms. That's another possibility to this. You see his gold chain and the gun. And then you can see all his tattoos that he had at the time. He's filling the frame. There's not a lot of huge amount of empty space. His head is, the top of his head, there's just a little bit of space up here. So it's like his eyes again are on just above that top third. His body is slightly at an angle. Not a harsh angle, but a slight angle so that he's filling most of it. And his expression is powerful. And once again, the camera angle is just a little bit low, looking up. So that means that's a little clue for us. He's somebody powerful. We should be looking up to him. Steve McCurry, he is the National Geographic photographer who did that very famous portrait of the Afghan girl. But in his portraits, his are mostly going to be color photography, and he's almost always using the colors of the country or the city or the town that he is in to mix with and be a background for his subjects. So this is a girl who is in, I want to say like Western China or maybe leading more towards Nepal. I'm not entirely sure. But bright, vibrant yellow ochre wall, and then her authentic styling and authentic dress. You can see her hair is just as it is on a normal day. There's no makeup. There's no extra sense of I'm posing for you other than I'm here and I'm going to look straight at you. Okay? Strong eye contact even though we're looking down at her. This is another kid. This one is from India, and I think it's during the Holi festival when it's all about color and spring, and so everybody's covered with pigmented chalk, like it's not actual real chalk, but corn flour that's been dyed with pigments, and then people color themselves with it. So he's photographing in a way so that it's vibrant and harmonic color. For those of you guys who remember from any Art 1 class you've taken in the past, yellow and red are complementary, yellow and green and red. Oh my gosh, you guys, sorry, it's late at night. Green and red are complementary colors. They work really well together, and they have sort of like a partnership that makes the colors almost vibrate and add to the intensity. The kid is looking, the camera angle itself is almost straight on eye level with him, but his eyes are looking up. So it gives us the feeling that the camera angle is slightly high, but it's very, very subtle. You have a simple background where things in the background are out of focus, okay? So sometimes if you have things in the background that you can't make go away, by using settings on your camera, you can make the background become more simple. This photographer, back to a photographer who works mostly in black and white, Sebastião Salgado. He is from Brazil. He is alive and still working currently. And one of his major projects was photographing people all around the world in refugee camps. And while he wasn't there to photograph little kids, he found that little kids would flock to him and want their picture taken. So he really did not want to do cute little kids. He wanted to show the dignity of each of these children who had been forced out of their home of origin and were on the run for their lives, and doing it in a way that was painful and powerful, that, you know, these people are fled from their wherever they had lived, and they usually had to do it on foot, so there's a lot of suffering there. I got to see these pictures in a museum, and just so you get the sense of them, when he made the prints are about 8 feet tall and about 4 to 5 feet wide. So it's almost like the sense of a door in a house. That's how big the pictures are. You're looking at the children larger than life. He had them keep whatever props or original clothing they had with them to help tell the story of their travels and where they're coming from. And in all these pictures, Salgado is photographing with eye level camera or slightly low, so that we're looking up at them. He's trying to give us the sense and the feeling of power for these children and respect for these children in every picture. Here's another one that he did. This one is more outdoors. It's the same as the last one. We have a natural expression. We're looking up at the child. The background is simple. The black and white in this picture really helps us focus on the subject's expression, so that we're not distracted by any of the color of their clothing or their beads or their jewelry or anything like that. It's just all about the look on this kid's face. The last person I wanted to share with you is Deanne Arbus. She was a New York-based American photographer working in the 70s and possibly the early 80s. And her favorite thing to photograph were people who were sort of outsiders. So this is somebody from a circus. And so it's like the tattooed man. And you'll notice that we're back like in the afternoon, soft, even lighting. So you can see there's sun poking through the bushes in the background. But she's photographing him so he's not squinting. There's no harsh light on him. He's laying down on the ground, relaxing, and so she's photographing at his eye level, sitting on the ground with him. He's got a really relaxed pose, and again, it's his props or his costume, in this case his tattoos, that are telling the story of who he is. And that he's sitting very calmly, looking right at us, knowing that part of this picture, or the purpose of this, is so that we can stare at him for long periods of time and really look at all of his tattoos and figure out what they're all about and what story's being told. So, your job for this week is to pick 1 or 2 people to be your subject. The reason why I say 1 or 2, you will only be photographing one person at a time, but I have several different tasks for you to try. So you might want to work with one person on one day, getting some of it done, and then switch to another person for another day. For this entire thing, I want you to work outdoors. And then before you start, go over the shot list with the person that you're working with and kind of discuss what it is you're trying to do. You can even show them the slideshow if you want, if it helps. Consider letting them have a prop, something to hold or to work with, that will make them feel more comfortable. And notice that I said help them and you feel comfortable by talking and listening. Some of you guys don't necessarily enjoy photographing people, or if you are photographing people, you're interested in like just, oh, there's a candid shot, like street photography. I see somebody down the street that looks really interesting, pull up my camera, zoom in on them, click, take the picture. That person and I never had a conversation. They don't know that I took their picture. That's not portrait photography, that's street photography. And so part of this challenge is talking to somebody, using relationship for a little bit while you're photographing so that they understand you understand them, and taking pictures of them. You can use whatever camera you want, and if you're working with multiple people, that's fine, but there's only one person in the picture at a time. Okay, so the first task is how you look at light. So I'd like you to use the same person in these two pictures. Your camera should be fairly close up, so you should be photographing, framing them kind of like the Jimi Hendrix picture at the very beginning of the slideshow, looking close up at them where it's about half their body or closer. So you'd be between around 6 feet or so away from them. You want to take the first portrait of them in bright sunlight. And this may cause them to squint. That's okay. What we're looking at is shadow patterns and how that stuff works. The second portrait I'd like you to do, move them to shade. Not dark foresty shade, but shade where you get, it's even shade, okay? The second picture I'd like you to try is the idea of eye contact. Now, you're going to do 2 pictures of your person. This time I want you to be about 6 to 10 feet away. One portrait where they're looking at you. Another portrait where they're looking away. Okay, they look down, up, whichever, off to the side, but it needs to make sense with the emotion or the feeling they're putting forward. No matter what, you should still be able to see their face. It's just that their eyes are looking somewhere else. All right, third shot, camera angles. We want to be in even light, again, like either shade or soft, non-direct sunlight. We're taking 3 photos. It's the same subject for all 3. So for the first one, I want you to take one where the camera has that slight tilt. So this is kind of a throwback to the camera angles assignment. So the camera is slightly tilted. The second one is, I'd like you to work from a slightly high angle. And the key word here is slight. So when we did camera angles, I had you laying down on the ground to do worm's eye, or climbing up on a ladder, or standing up on a chair looking down to do bird's eye. In this case, we're just moving the camera a little bit above or below your subject's eye level. Rule of thirds. Same subject for both shots. One shot, I want you to hold the camera vertical or in portrait mode and make sure that your subject is placed for rule of thirds. The second shot, I want it to be horizontal, and again, the subject's placed in rule of thirds. And the last thing I'd like you to test is what kind of background should be behind your subject. So get that soft light. You want the same subject for both shots. One where the background is obviously simple, and another one where it's complex. So in total, you will have 12 pictures. If you take more, that's fine, but when we get down to editing and turning in, we want this specific list of 12. So once you've done and chosen the top 12, if you took more than 12. You're going to import them into Lightroom, and you're going to edit all 12 images. So whether you're using Lightroom Mobile on a phone or an iPad, or you are using Lightroom Classic on a computer, I want you to look at either the light or the basic tools. I want you to look at exposure, so playing with the exposure, the highlights, the shadows. I'd like you to look for the clarity, texture, and dehaze sliders. I want you to edit all images to black and white. Please don't worry, because you're using Lightroom, which is non-destructive, you will have an original color version still saved either in your camera roll on your phone, or the original will always be accessible inside of Lightroom Classic. So you're going to be safe, okay? So I think that is it. Please ask questions or email me if you need more support or clarification.